You're watching Badass Ladyfolk. I'm your host, Christine Stoddard. And today my lovely guests are Kendra Bostock, not Ross, formerly known as.
You got it!
And Miss Al Boogie of STooPS in Bed-Stuy. Thank you so much for being here. What is STooPS?
Oh, you're looking at me? Yeah.
No.
I'm like,
pop quiz. Pop quiz, no.
One to the other. No. ABC, multiple choice.
Just kidding. So STooPS is an organization, and we use arts as a catalyst for community building, specifically in Bed-Stuy for now.
Okay.
It's a big neighborhood.
Yeah,
it is.
We started in 2013, and we have we're rethinking the name, but I like to call it an arts festival. Some folks call it an art crawl. You could also call it a block party, but we have a big summer event where we have artists perform on stoops and sidewalks like someone that we know.
Yes, thank you for the time and the space and the love.
Yes, as an opportunity for artists to get to know the neighborhood more, the neighborhood to get to know the artists, neighbors to get to know each other, to get to know local businesses, local organizations. So it's all about using the arts as a catalyst for community building.
Ooh. Anything to add? Now I'm looking at you.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a Bed-Stuy resident for longer than STooPS has, been founded by Kendra. And we focus on artists that live in Bed-Stuy or born and raised in Bed-Stuy to present to their neighbors. So I think that's a really key thing. I think pre-COVID, Bed-Stuy really had this kind of like Renaissance artist thing happening that really made it easy to pull from like high quality presenters. And then post-COVID, we haven't had much of a problem pooling. I think certain genres, the people have depleted. You came back to Bed-Stuy.
Yeah.
So Bed-Stuy has a very rich cultural people who normally have to present in Manhattan or tour, they live in Bed-Stuy. So it was great to give them work there.
Yeah. And it's such a wonderful, welcoming, communal space.
Thank you. Yeah, we work really hard at that. I mean, I guess I would add to what Al was saying. When I first started STooPS, I had been living in Bed-Stuy for about 4 years, and it was at the height of the conversations about gentrification, and so I was really trying to be mindful of like how I was there in this neighborhood with such a rich cultural and artistic legacy, and so I was like, as an artist, I want to offer my talents, what I have to share with the neighborhood, but definitely didn't want to come in with this like savior thing of like, this is what I have to offer. So I wanted to create a way for, since I was a part of the community, for myself and other artists, both long-term and other artists who had just arrived into the neighborhood like myself, to have an opportunity to present art. And like Al said, me personally, I found myself having to go into Manhattan or at minimum downtown Brooklyn in order to rehearse and present my work. There are many more spaces for performing arts in Bed-Stuy now, but when I started, there were few and far between, and there was some like politics to like even navigate getting into those spaces. So I'm like, what is more accessible than a stoop? So that's another impetus behind me starting this organization.
And where are you from, though?
I'm from Detroit, Michigan. 313.
I have a funny story. This one time, I was visiting Detroit for U.S. Social Forum, and we bumped into each other.
And I'm like, hi, what are you doing here?
Oh, you already knew each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
from New York.
Here,
And then
right,
I bumped
okay.
into her in Detroit.
And you were just visiting family?
I was visiting family.
Yeah.
She was there for the
For
U.S. Social Forum. And
What is that?
A great question. I haven't been a part of it in a long time. I'm sure people listening to this know what it is. But it's basically like, I think it's oh my gosh, I do not want to get this wrong, Christine.
Okay, never mind.
I was at U.S. Social Forum as an activist.
Well, I was just going to a party that my friend recommended, and that's how I ran it. So I didn't even realize that it was part of the U.S. Social Forum. I was just like, oh, this is cute. Yeah.
So, Kendra, why Bed-Stuy? Why did you leave Detroit in the first place? What was it about New York City? Which seems to be, for many people, an easier question to answer. But what was it about Bed-Stuy specifically that drew you?
Yeah. Well, New York, I mean, it's New York.
Yeah.
And Detroit has it's another space that has transformed a lot. But when I was growing up in Detroit, there weren't as many artistic opportunities, especially for dance. There were like little pockets, but it wasn't as plentiful as it is here. And so I came to college here. I did the Fordham A-Lee BFA program.
Ooh,
so that's
fancy.
what brought me to New York. And to be perfectly honest, I ended up in Bed-Stuy by happenstance. I was like looking for a place because I lived in Washington Heights and I had to move. And so someone that I know had an opening for a room in Bed-Stuy. And I was like, let me go check it out. And then when I got there, I was like, I love it here. Honestly, because it reminds me a lot of Detroit in a sense of there's a sense of community. The brownstones are just gorgeous. And, I think about in Detroit, we have folks that sit out on the porch, and like there's a big porch culture. So stoop culture is kind of like comparable to that. And also for me in Detroit is like this very specific place where it's like the block that I grew up on was like super nice. All the new neighbors knew each other. Like everyone took care of their property. All the kids came outside and played. But if you went the block over, it was a whole nother situation.
Yeah.
And I feel like Bed-Stuy is like that
Very
too.
similar,
It's
block
like
by block.
yeah, it's like you go to one block and it's like, oh, look at all the brownstones, and then you go to another block and you be like, yep, I'm gonna keep walking, Not to say there's anything wrong, but it's just it's like stepping into a different world, which for me is a little adventurous. So.
And Al, why did you choose Bed-Stuy? Where were you living before?
I moved to New York by attending NYU. You could say
also
that.
Fancy.
Yeah, that bill is fancy. Yeah, it was fancy. I was very strategic. It had a dorm life, and I wanted to move to New York City. So it's interesting, like, to have the privilege of getting into that college in order to move here. And so basically the first place I lived outside of an NYU dorm was Ridgewood, on the border of Bushwick and Queens. And I was clubbing and traveling all over New York, and Bed-Stuy is not far from Ridgewood, and I was like, ooh, it's so pretty there. And I moved, I think in, probably about 10 years after I graduated into the neighborhood. Mostly haven't looked back. Yeah, I love living in Bed-Stuy.
And you both mentioned the brownstones. That seems to be something that many people gravitate toward. And the trees, right? And, of course, the family life, the block life. Okay, so paint our viewers a picture of how STooPS has changed. Like the first couple of years when you really were on these STooPS to how it was most recently, and then where you're going.
So when we first started, I like to tell the story because it's a little bit wacky.
Yeah, stories are good.
I came up with the idea of STooPS in like January of 2013, and then I went on tour for February and March. And before I left, I had talked to a couple of friends of mine. They're no longer in the neighborhood, but De'Ara Wright and Steph Wiley, and they had an organization called Gather Brooklyn.
They're still in the neighborhood.
They are?
They don't live in the neighborhood,
Okay.
but Brooklyn Supported Agriculture is in our neighborhood.
That's true.
It's rooted in our neighborhood, yeah.
That's true. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Yes. So Steph Wiley is one of the founders of Brooklyn Supported Agriculture, which is a CSA, a community supported agriculture and packers, like green farm packing.
And vegetables in our neighborhood.
So I told them about the idea. Then I left on tour for 2 months. I came back in March, end of March. And I was like, yeah, I still, I'm still really feeling the burn of this idea. I think I actually want to do it. And I'm like, all right, let's think about 2014. And they're like, why? And I was like, they're like, let's do it this year. And I was like, okay.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, maybe in the fall, before it gets too cold. And they're like, nah, let's do it in June. So the first STooPS we organized from March 2013, and it was on June 23rd, 2013.
That is ambitious.
Yes, and we had 22 artists spread out throughout Bed-Stuy, Bed-Stuy large.
Yep.
And then we had 6 culminating artists at Stuyvesant Mansion, including Lava Dance, which is a dance circus company in this mansion space, Ashe Dance Theater Collective, and the Grammy nominated. They won? Won? I don't know. They're great. Anyway, Grammy adjacent duo, La Nubians. And so it was like, we did it!
It was incredible.
It was really incredible, and we were on a high. So we charged for our sightseers, which is our program and an entry for the culminating event, because we had to make money somehow, because we had, it wasn't even $1 in a dream. It was a dream and some prayer, lots of prayer. And so we did it. We're like, okay, cool. Some of the feedback that we got, especially because the Stuyvesant Mansion is right next door, or a couple doors down from a NYCHA development. And some of the feedback that we got was that the charging of the sightseer was prohibitive for people. And so we were like, okay, so how can we navigate this? And so then that's when we started to seek out grant funding and made our sightseer. We started off sliding scale, but then we ended up making it free. But we kind of kept this model of having anywhere between 15 to 20 artists spread throughout Bed-Stuy. And as we started to experiment, we started to concentrate folks in different zones, because we found that folks on the periphery didn't really get as much traffic. And so then fast forward to 2018. And I would say from 2013 until 2017, I had an organizing team of anywhere from 6 to 8 folks. And because of, life, people having babies, getting married, different jobs, my team whittled down to 3. And so I was like, okay, what are we going to do? So we started to truncate the event then, and we had 10 artists, and we had some partnerships with the Laundromat Project and the Macon branch of the Brooklyn Public Library. And is that when you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, is that yours?
Is that Eastern Parkway?
Okay, yeah, I was like, that's your cohort, I think. Yes. And so that partnership was to help with capacity, to be perfectly honest. And also, I think it was great. I felt like it was great for the artists, because the artists got residency space in the libraries, and then they actually got to present what they were working on as a part of STooPS. And so then in 2019, I actually took a break because I got stress-induced shingles after the 2018 event. And also, one of our grants that we normally get, that's a big staple grant for us, was the day after. The deadline was the day after STooPS, and I was like, I don't have it in me. I can't. So, we essentially didn't have any funding, and I wasn't feeling well. So I was like, all right, we're going to take a break. So then...
just quickly, I'm very sorry. Thank you for your sacrifices. That is intense.
It informs the rest of how STooPS got shaped.
Yeah. Keep going.
Yeah. So then in 2020, I was really am I going to do this? Am I going to bring this back? Because I'm not going to lie, 2019, like, I don't really have a summer because I spend my summer preparing. Like, 2019, I, like, live my best life. Like, that's when I, like, met my now husband. Like, I was going to the beach. I was like, this is great. New York summers are awesome when I don't have to work all summer. Anyway, so I really was like, even before the pandemic hit. But once the pandemic hit, you know, my then partner and now husband was like, you know, you really have like the perfect scenario for STooPS to continue. Like, people are like itching to get outside and do something. If we find a way to like truncate it so that we can make sure people are safe by encouraging social distancing and giving out masks and, you know, doing all the PPE things, like STooPS can really thrive. And so I was very reluctant, but we decided to truncate and have all the performances happen on one stoop. Mm-hmm. We had 7. It was supposed to be 5, but every year I'm like, oh, it's going to be 5, and then it'd be like 9. Anyway.
And you had an Instagram Live. You had some virtual component.
Yeah. We that year I think we live streamed it on Zoom, and we had and we had some Instagram Live, but we definitely live streamed it on Zoom because my parents were on the Zoom the entire time. Like, yay!
Are they still in Michigan?
Yeah. Aww. They come every year for STooPS, but that year, you know, they're older, so they were nervous to fly, but they were like, we still want to be there. So that's why I ended up Zooming it, because they were like, you must bring us in. And that year, I would say, for me personally, that year was the most impactful for me because
I was there.
Yeah. A number of the artists said that was the first time that they had been able to perform in front of a live audience, definitely for months, some folks for the whole year, and that was in July at that point. Many of the community members said it was the first time in a long time they had been able to see live performance. And then specifically my like next door neighbor was just like, he was like moved to tears. And he's like normally like this like super stern guy. He was like moved to tears and was like, that was just so wonderful and so beautiful. We're so blessed and so honored to like have you on the block. And actually later on that year, he passed away from COVID. So like,
no,
yeah.
Kendra.
So it was like special that I feel like I got to give him this experience, before he transitioned to being an ancestor. And so that year was really, really, really special for me. And on top of that, not that I'm looking for accolades, but they be nice sometimes.
Yes, no, you have to say this.
Yeah, we were featured in the New York Times as the best of dance, best of the street that year too. So in addition to like the impact in my like feels, I feel like STooPS started to get some notoriety in terms of like at least the press. And so we're like, okay, we kind of like this is an interesting model, especially given my team was still small. So the next year we still kept everything on one stoop. But we expanded to 2 stoops, and we had 1 stoop that was for the performances, and then we had some healing workshops and our kitty corner in another space because we wanted to, include that component because it's something that the neighborhood was needing, at that time. So this was 2021. And so then 2022, I'm like, all right, let's start to give back into expanding. And so we had 5 spaces. So we had 2 performance spaces, a kitty corner space, and a healing workshop space. And then there were 5. I'm missing something, but that's okay.
There was a lot going on.
Yeah, there was a lot going on. But then in 2023, it was the 10th anniversary. So we're like, what we gonna do? I gotta do something special. And so in my own artistic work, too, I've been doing a lot of interviewing of long-term residents, just talking to them about Bed-Stuy and the way that Bed-Stuy has historically had this resilience of like Black folks, resilient Black folks who transform the neighborhood, and what are some of the ways that they felt like they were able to do that. And a recurring theme that kept coming up were block parties, like the importance of the block parties in the neighborhood, the power of community building, just how excited people got about the block parties in Bed-Stuy. And so I was like, what if we make STooPS a block party this year? And so there were a lot of grinding and a lot of like going through different, government channels. We were able to block off the street. And so we still had the artists performing on a couple different STooPS throughout the block, but we also were able to have street games and double dutch, vendors, our DJ. We had like those cool like marquee letters that people could, like photo booths, I guess I would say. And so where are we going? I feel like we like this block party. I think like the team, we all agreed that we like the block party feel because it still gives people this feeling of being able to like traverse the space. But it also just gives us an opportunity to just really fill the streets. Yeah. And in the other model, people would get to commune with the folks who were at that particular stoop at that time. And, some folks ended up walking together as they crawled from one space to another. But having it all on one block, everybody's like, hey, 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 you know what I mean? Like, people get to see each. I get to see people because I would always be running around so much that I didn't even get to see half the performances or, like, the people that came. So maybe it's a little selfish, but I think everybody else liked it too.
I mean, it's selfish, but also like when you put all that work into something like STooPS, being able to see people and connect with them because they come is reinvigorating. So, and you perform there too, so you want to see the people that are coming there.
I do.
Yeah, I really loved the block party this year. I remember like at noon, when I saw everything just all set up and I was walking from one end of the block to the other, I was like, this is gorgeous. Like, it just looked so beautiful. Yeah.
And what was the response that you got from people?
People really loved it.
You can say it. Don't be shy. Don't be modest.
No, I think people really loved it. Like, this was the longest time frame. Like in the past, we would normally go for like 3 or 4 hours, but we did it from 12 to 7. So this was the longest time frame. And there were some folks, I mean, my family's always there the whole time because I work them. But there were some folks who voluntarily were there pretty much the entire day.
Some of the artists and some of the audience were there the entire day. Like, even some of the artists that after they finished, you saw them at the card tables and walking around and enjoying people and shutting the whole thing down. Yeah. It was really incredible to see.
All of the vendors had a really great time in addition to, like selling things. They were like, we just really enjoyed ourselves and being here. And I was really worried about that because that was a new component for us. So I'm like, yeah, great.
And why did you choose to have vendors this time?
Because for me, it's another important entity in the community to loop in terms of connecting folks, local businesses, especially I think in Brooklyn in general and in Bed-Stuy, like small businesses really hold up the economy. Like most folks, when a chain comes into the neighborhood, they're like, what are you doing here? You know what I mean? So I wanted to have another way to increase patronage to local businesses, and bring in income. To be perfectly honest, because we are a fiscally sponsored organization, but we still have to figure out how to make money too. And so, hoping that might be a source of income for us and for the local businesses who participate.
Yeah, it has to be funded. But also, people need stuff at a block party. You need things to drink. You need, definitely the vendor element was another artisanal element to the event as well. And it really fed into the whole thing. And everybody I spoke to said they did really well.
Yeah, and I think it wasn't intentional, but most of the vendors really fit into the culture of STooPS itself.
It was intentional. Yes, it was.
How you curated them?
She was intentional. I wasn't. I was like, everybody come. I think you were intentional about who you reached out to and invited.
But I would say who ended up being there. It was like when you have a puzzle maker and a theater group. Yeah. And people making, body butters and drinks and And then we had the home care group that really wanted to be there. I think that definitely is a part of our mission and what we do, the kind of vendors that showed up.
It is, but I wasn't trying to make it happen. I was just attributing it to the magic of STooPS.
Yeah, I mean,
the magic.
It's also marketing. Like, if
Yes.
you're marketed a certain way, people want to be there for it.
And you do an excellent job of marketing and branding.
Absolutely.
I would love to hear some of your thoughts on that for community organizations, for smaller arts organizations. What, and I'm sure, Kendra, you were heavily involved as well. Or
No, I'm very excited that I was able to like completely hand it off to somebody who I trusted, who upholds the values of the organization and just has like beautiful vision. So I'm happy to be like, I was able to step away from that and even be guided by Al. So
Al, how do you strategize for the organization? How do you build this brand? What kind of vision do you have for it in terms of marketing?
I mean, I have to say that I probably wouldn't apply for a job to be a marketing director just anywhere. I don't thrive very well in places where, like, I'm like, this sucks.
Right.
So I'm very passionate about STooPS. I've performed in it. I've done social media promotion for it. And it's just a beautiful thing in the community to have somebody like, oh, everybody come and experience this art on a summer day. I just think it's incredible. So that definitely is a big part of why I am the marketing director at STooPS. But I'll also add, like any other marketing person, I survey, how the message is getting across. And if people are confused, I want to clarify it. I think the fact that Kendra and STooPS have built all these relationships with these artists is really important. And I've been doing the Alumni Artist Project, which is like incredible for me to go and meet with different artists and talk to them about STooPS and their own stuff. I had such a good time when I met with you.
In my bathing suit in my apartment.
Your apartment is cute.
Thank you for coming over.
It was my pleasure, actually. And so I basically wanted to make sure that people who didn't know what STooPS was got a better understanding of it. Kendra also gave me room to be part of curation this year. I thought people who really came from the community was really important, and I think we had an incredible. I mean, it gave me goosebumps how intergenerational this lineup was, and so that was a huge inspiration in telling the story of STooPS. And then I go from Kendra, and it's like, okay, well, what do you envision for this? Okay, I know how to work backwards and go, this is what we need to do. So, unfortunately with social media right now, it's basically like another television station, and you have to pay to play. So I was like, we need a budget for ads. You can make these really great reels on Instagram and on TikTok, but if you don't put a little bit of $1 bills behind them, people don't really see them, unfortunately. So I just spent time with Kendra saying, like, okay, how many people do we want to be there? What's the theme? What are we going for? And then Kendra also wanted the 10th anniversary to be a big part of it. And she came up with the idea of getting a T-shirt designed. But what ended up happening was that when I met with her on that, I'm like, this could be our overall graphic for the 10th year. And so that really helped with getting a vision across. And then, just being, she had money for staff this year. So being able to be paid to practice and put it into practice and do A and B testing, that was really helpful as well.
Yay! Okay, and I don't want to dwell on it. Sorry, just quickly. Many people who have ideas for neighborhood level or community level art projects or creative projects get discouraged because of funding, right? And I am curious about what advice you have for people who might be seeking fiscal sponsorship and applying for grants and trying to find money to put into marketing, for instance, just quickly.
Yeah. So I would say to start off that I am very rooted in the idea that compensation does not always equal money. And sometimes money is not as valuable as other things can be. And so especially when one is getting started and they don't have the money, just being super mindful of like, okay, what other things do you have to offer? Like, I am a Pilates instructor, and when Al first started working for us, I was like, hey, I don't have any money for a social media person, but do you like Pilates? Okay, I teach a weekly class. I can get you a guest. I can get you to be a guest in my class, and we'll, see the value in whatever the difference is. I can teach you some private Pilates lessons. You know what I mean? My husband cooks really well. Like, some of the homeowners, he was like, I'm going to make you some jerk chicken. So, like, thinking about what are some other things that can bring value to folks. But you have to be mindful of, like, what will be valuable to them, you know what I mean? So that requires some relationship building, and that requires a little bit more intentionality than just, like, a transactional, like, here's the money. So relationship building, alternate forms of compensation. I know a lot of folks who have gotten some of the larger fiscal sponsors like Fracture Atlas or The Field, but our fiscal sponsor is Bailey's Cafe, which is another organization in the neighborhood. And I've loved that relationship because it gives us an opportunity to support them, and they have been super supportive, not only as a fiscal sponsor, but also just as a community partner in, like, helping to navigate the community for advice. Me being able to go to Stephanie Siegel, the founder, and be like, I don't understand this aspect of leadership. Can you help me understand this? And so, I recommend finding a like-minded or like mission-aligned organization. But again, it's about having a relationship. I had a relationship with Bailey's. It wasn't just like, hey, can you be my fiscal sponsor? Because it is a lot of, like, legal responsibility. But if you already have a relationship with that organization, they know you have integrity, then they're like, yeah, sure, you know what I mean? And then for the grant funding, I would say the best thing that I ended up doing was paying a grant writer for one season before I, like, got money to have a steady person, like, paying a grant writer for one season, because what they did was revamped all of my language. And so then, they made it really pretty, and they made it, like, grant worthy. And then I was able to, like, rinse and repeat and just, like, replace and copy and paste to get grants from then on. So it was an investment up front, but because I had been writing them, I kind of knew a little bit, and just to get that refinement of the language was super helpful.
Great. And I did cut you off when you were going to add something before. Do you remember what it was?
Yeah, I was going to add to what makes Al such a great marketing director.
Yay!
is
More love.
Yeah, is her research, and it's a combination of, like, the field in terms of, like, oh, this is what folks are doing in terms of, like, we had a conversation about newsletters, like restructuring our newsletter, and she was like giving me examples of, like, this is what folks are doing, but also research in terms of, like, her engagement and involvement in the community, which I think gives her this, like, sense of intuition of, like, I think this is what our folks will respond to, folks in our neighborhood. Like, these colors are, like, I think this is what folks in the neighborhood would respond to. So it's not just, like, the field, but it's also connected to, like, the folks who are actually there, who we're actually trying to speak to.
Yeah, I live and I shop and I vote and I volunteer in our neighborhood. And then even participating and initiating the Alumni Artist Project, like, that was a big part of how I am on a daily basis, like, talking to people and seeing how things impact them. And, sometimes you fail, and it's just a matter of just, like, rolling with what works and learning from the failures.
I really appreciate how both of you mentioned talking to people, building relationships, being intentional, not being transactional. What are some of the common mistakes that you think people who are trying to build within their community make? Or do you think it's just like...
I can start. I mean, we both have different training in activism. I would say that my background in activism is you basically go where you're welcomed. If you're not welcome yet, you basically figure out the needs of a place. I put my money where my mouth is. I shop in local business. I feel like actually we're quite privileged in Brooklyn and in Bed-Stuy.
I'm holding that in.
Oh, no. Let it out.
Let it out. I feel like we're actually quite privileged in Bed-Stuy that we're able to support local businesses. People live in areas where they can't, where they have to shop in big box places and only online. And I spend my hard-earned money in my neighborhood, and I think that builds a lot of trust. And I'm just very, I'm my grandfather's granddaughter. I talk to everybody and smile and say hello, and I'm very social. And just a lot of what I need as, an artist and a citizen is pretty commonplace with a lot of other people. And so I just take that into consideration into what we're building in the organization. I mean, we're working artists, so we know what a lot of working artists need. And, we field our questions. So, yeah, that's a big part of how I get the info.
I think going back to your initial question, I don't know. This is the only organization I started, so I don't know if I could speak to field-wide mistakes.
Well, maybe pardon me, I probably shouldn't have framed it in a negative way, but it is a concern that some people have, and it's something it's a question that is often framed negatively and coming from a place of fear.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is this skill of active listening, in the sense of being super observant, because what I found with STooPS is that, yes, it's important to have a relationship with some of the big dogs, like the local politicians and the folks who have the official titles and recognition, but I think it's also just as important to know those unofficial gatekeepers, the bodega owner who can introduce you to different people, or that one neighbor who might not be the block association president, but who actually knows everybody on the block, you know what I mean, on a first name basis. And so I think, as founders, we can get into this strategic mode of okay, we got to be strategic, and you might miss those important folks if you aren't in a space of stepping back and just looking and listening, because also somebody who has the official title might actually have a toxic relationship in the neighborhood with the folks that you're trying to build with. And so if you're in association with them, you're thinking oh yeah, I'm in good with, you know what I mean? I don't want to call anybody out, but I'm in good with the, you know what I mean, the president of la 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 la. But meanwhile, folks are oh, the president of la la la, you know what I mean? So
it rubs off on you.
Right. So just being very active in listening, and even noticing that nuance of you're, you know what I mean? So you'd be what is that? Let me go ask around, let me do some experimenting. And, for me, again, it goes back to relationships, because then you can go back to the bodega owner and be what you know about president of such and such? And they'll tell you oh, blah, 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 blah. But if you don't have that relationship with that person, you might not get that tea, per se.
Okay, I'm going to back out of gossip territory. No, but I appreciate both of you contributing. So let's go to what you do as artists. I want to hear how you have been artists with STooPS, for STooPS, and then how you bring your art to other spaces. Whoever goes first. It's fine with me.
Well, ironically enough, I didn't actually start performing in STooPS until 2017. Despite the fact that I am an artist, I've always throughout the time of STooPS have had a prolific artistic career outside of STooPS. It was just like STooPS was like my, we all have our hats, and it was like STooPS was my organizing hat, and it was just like I was organizing. So it was 2017, our 5th anniversary, where like I said, we used to have a culminating performance, and that year we were like, we don't really want to do a culminating performance because we had the festival over 2 days as a way to celebrate the 5th anniversary. And they were like, well, what if you are the culminating artist? And I'm like, who, me?
The organizer.
And they're like, yeah. And I was like, huh, what a noble concept. And so I performed in 2017, and it was actually really transformational for me and my artistic practice. The piece that I did, what was it called? I don't remember the title of it, but basically I wrote this poem that was a comparison of Bed-Stuy and Detroit, and did a structured improv to this particular poem. And, it was just talking about my love of both places, and like how, I saw so much synergy and, and the differences and uniqueness of each of each space. And so my artistic work had always been rooted in the African diaspora, so rooted in the experiences of folks of the African diaspora. But for that particular piece, kind of starting from my own experience of my community, my artistic work started to focus on community, and actually how can I bring community into my artistic practice, as opposed to it just being about community but performed in a proscenium space. Like, how can my artistic work actually be about, performed in and with community? And so ever since then, like, I've been the audience engagement components of my work have increased. I've tried to find ways to do different workshops, or whatever the topic of the piece is. It's like, how can I bring in different intergenerational folks to come and contribute to the content of the piece? Because I generally, from my artistic work, I start with a question, and for me, the artistic process is the answering of that question in different ways. So it's like, how can I bring, this elder in? How can I bring this young person in to start to think about, like, the answers to whatever the questions of the piece are? And so now, like, I really feel like there's this, like, merging of the hats. My artistic work is much more in alignment with my community organizing work, and, like, and vice versa. So I'll pause there. Beautiful.
Well, I moved to New York to figure out how to become an artist. I was an artist as a kid. In Florida, I was street dancing all the time in school, and it was definitely nurtured and encouraged by my teachers. I didn't have any formal training, but my middle school and my high school were very safe spaces for me to figure out singing and dancing in those settings without any kind of formal training. And then I moved to New York, and when I moved here outside of university, I really immersed myself in the club scene and got involved with and found a lot of the street dance pioneers, studied with them here in New York, out in LA, really immersed myself in being a student within these cultures, and also partying all night sober. Like, I would dance for 12 hours a night, and I look back in that and I'm like, oh, that's training. I wasn't thinking about it at the time. And then I got pulled into teaching dance. I was considered to be, like, very intuitive with kids, but I also was kind of, like, untrained. So I sought a lot of professional development within the institutions I worked for. Definitely grew as a teacher and a choreographer, worked with, like, kids who are now professional dancers in the street dance scene, flexors that I worked with when they were 16, 17, 18 years old, and got to choreograph them, and now they've been in all these music videos and in stages across the world. So that was actually a really beautiful opportunity. And I also was very musical. And so just prior to the first STooPS, I started working on an album that I had all these ideas for that I wrote, and I hired a producer who, it's so funny. I hired this producer, Pegasus Warning. He became the drummer on the James Corbin show. I was like, I had his talent first. And I made this album, and then when STooPS started, I was like, oh, I want to do a live music and dance performance. And so since then, I've been integrating the music performances and the dance performances. I've worked with some really incredible choreographers. I worked with Sherry Silver and ended up on the television show Hunters. I worked with Rennie Harris, and now there's a trailer for the film out that we worked on called Once Again. And then I started during COVID working on my present music that I'm releasing, and I really taught myself to produce it myself because I had the time, and YouTube had all these tutorials. And a lot of music making, because of technology, has become way more intuitive over the past 5 to 10 years, whereas when I was 19, 20, I would intern at music studios and I'd be like, I cannot figure this out. I did some things technically, but I just couldn't figure out how to put a whole project together. And so now, as of today, I have 6 songs released. I have more coming. I continue to work as a dancer and a dance teacher. One of my greatest pleasures is working in libraries. This year, I got sent around for the 50th anniversary of hip-hop in the libraries this year. Yay. And it's this you actually mentioned this in your artist alumni thing, but the sweet spot is it's this intergenerational, multicultural experience where I go and teach dance, and people are moving, and we talk about somatics and embodiment now and how much it's probably really healing them also while they're there. And that's also been my greatest joy, has been teaching this dance form in libraries. And you could not tell me when I was 19, 20 years old, wilding out in the club, that I would end up in the library someday teaching babies to old people. I would be like, what? They do that in libraries? But now I have the pleasure of doing that. So yeah, I have music releases. I have more music releases to come. I crowdfunded for this current music release, and so that's where I'm at as an artist. And I use our home base and being able to work and live in Bed-Stuy as a real inspiration, and also a place to work on my apartment is great for that. So yeah.
Yeah, we still send Al out to do artist things and teaching artist things via STooPS, even though, she's a marketing director because she came to us originally as an artist. So
yeah, well, congratulations on moving into self-producing too, because I know
Thank you.
Many women, it seems, and from what I've heard, are often discouraged and intimidated from the technical aspects of production.
I definitely was
right?
discouraged and intimidated.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until we had, I don't know, I just had been doing it through other people, and then somebody hooked me up with Ableton on my laptop, and I was like, I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah.
And then I was trying to, and then COVID happened. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to spend 2 to 3 hours a day figuring this out. And that's what I did.
Yeah, well, that's incredible. I did, on the note of women, want to move the conversation in that direction about what it's like being female leaders in the community, and if there are special blessings and challenges that come with that.
Blessings? I don't know.
I definitely have blessings. I see both, but yeah, I can definitely speak on that.
I feel the challenges a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I talk to Al about this a lot. In our neighborhood, there's a boys' club, I feel like, and it makes sense because it's of a couple generations of men who have been leaders in the neighborhood for a long time, and they have naturally trained other leaders. But there's been several experiences that I've had where I'm trying to move something forward or spark up a partnership or a conversation, and it was just I felt like I was hitting a roadblock. And now we actually don't have any men on the team. But before,
I don't know, that's a terrible thing.
No, it's not. No, it's not a terrible thing. It's a little bit intentional, a little bit happenstance. But when we did have men on the team, like, I remember specifically, like, there was this one person who I just felt like I wasn't getting through to them. And then I had someone who was, like, just above the level of an intern. So just in terms of, like, being entrenched into the organizing team, you know, not to say that this person didn't have any power in the organization, but just, like, new, just fresh, you know what I mean? And I was like, you know what? Go over here and talk to this person about, you know what I mean, about this thing. And, like, made mad headway. And I was like, okay, this is clearly...
Manese. They spoke Manese.
Yeah, I was like, this is clearly the gender thing because, like... You know what I mean? Like, you were corresponding with the founder and director, and now you talk to this person who's, like, a newbie in the organization, and now things are moving forward. But, like, now that I understand that, you know, I just move differently. You know what I mean? And, okay, now I got a benefit. But I will say, like, specifically, TAMA... The Tompkins Avenue Merchants Association, there is a strip called Black Girl Magic Row. Is that what they call it? And it's like these female entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs that are really, I think, just making lots of headway in the neighborhood.
They're probably globally known at this point.
Yeah. I would say that they are definitely globally known at this point. And I think, you know, they have a sense of camaraderie and sisterhood that I think has definitely propelled STooPS forward. And so I think now there's like a girls club contingency that is of leadership that's forming in the neighborhood, to the point where it's like, I don't necessarily have to deal with the boys club if I don't want to. You know, not to neglect that aspect of the neighborhood, but it's like, all right, I'm going to focus my energy and attention over here where I know, you know what I mean, I'm appreciated. So.
Yeah, I would say the blessings and the challenges are, and this is a blessing combined with a challenge. Misogyny is so interesting in the sense that, like, even if someone is getting to know you, the belief that you are not smart, I find so interesting when I interact with people that initially, secondarily, tertiarily, they're just like, oh, this person is not smart, and I have to explain things to them. And in my work in the neighborhood itself, or when I engage with people in the neighborhood, I either choose to call their bluff, or I am like, oh, okay, you can think I'm not smart, because I'm going to go do something anyway and go work on something anyway.
Get it done.
And get it done. I mean, I finish what I start, like, point blank. Like, if I had a mentee say to me once, you know what I love about you? You do what you say you're going to do. And so I think the blessing of that is, like, no matter how many people think you're not going to be something, no matter what, if you have the evidence of doing what you're saying, I love data, of doing what you're saying you're going to do regardless of adversity. I also had somebody once, like, I was talking to them, and they had, this was a male appearing person, I'm sure they identify as man, and they were like, oh, this person that introduced me and you, he's the great connector. And I was like, I'm a great connector. Like, I know a lot of the people that you also know. Like, I have connected them on things. Like, so that's a challenge, but also, like, I can back it up with being like, okay, well, here's the proof of these things that I've done. And just documentation of your accomplishments, I think, is really important, because people need you to prove. But the other challenges are, like, there are certain men who don't even think of us for things. And it's like, really? Like, like, our visual presence is everywhere. Like, you've seen us. Like, and I don't know. I feel like sometimes organizationally, the way that certain men of certain generations behave is they don't even think to look to us women as things. You know, when we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of hip-hop, you know, Cindy, Kool Herc's sister, was a huge part in how hip hop was created, if not one of the creators. And you have to like work so hard to bring her name up. So I don't know. I feel like there's like, as a natural part of misogyny, there's this erasure of women that happens, especially women of color and black women. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, well, okay, we still do stuff. Like, there's stuff that's happening. And so, yeah, I work with Kendra as far as what we do with STooPS. I'm like, how much do we got? What are our resources? Okay, let's work backward from there. Mm-hmm. And then I'm really good at DIY and working with what I have. I don't want to do that as much anymore. I feel like DIY is going to war in a way.
What do you mean?
Just doing everything yourself can be like emotionally and intellectually taxing, and it takes longer. Mm-hmm. So yeah, in my next body of work, I do want more collaborators involved for music is concerned, as far as music is concerned. But, you know, also proving yourself and that you can function and get things done is also proof of how you can have collaboration. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely.
But I feel like sometimes even when you just go, I've had experiences where I feel like I'm the same way. Like, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to make it happen. Like,
that's true.
Hook or crook.
Yeah.
And I've had instances where, like, I was in conversation with, you know, a man in the neighborhood about doing something, and they either seemed slightly uninterested or, like, were really dragging their feet. And so then, of course, I'm going to get it done. And then I hear, like, through the grapevine that they're mad. Because they're like, you went and did it. And it's like, well, yeah, I needed to get it done.
Well, that has happened to me a lot, but I just don't even think about their anger. No, honestly, like I've had people like message me like as if I ignored them, and then I bring the receipts, and I'm like, I did all those things you asked me, and then they're quiet.
See, I don't have receipts like that. You have a stellar memory. I don't. I'm just like, well, I needed to get it done. So how we move forward from here, or we don't, but I'm still gonna move. I mean,
I think that is also like a part of when you are actually doing what you say you're gonna do. Like, you're gonna make people angry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's acceptable, but it's such a huge part of like human nature.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and we can't focus so much on the anger that we don't do what we need to do.
I got blinders on, baby.
Right?
I'm like, I tried with you.
Well, we do have to start to wrap it up, but just quickly, I'm curious about how you function as an all women or mostly women team now.
Great.
Perfection.
Kendra gives me a lot of autonomy and trust. And the way that I work with Kendra is I see her as the founder and the visionary and the final say. So I'll be like, this is what I recommend based on this and this, outcome. I even say what I don't know. Like, this is not my ministry. This is not my expertise.
Yeah, and that takes humility.
Well,
and
thank
good
you.
for you.
Thank you.
Not everyone has that.
And I'm like, I don't know that. But if we were to make a decision right now, this is what I recommend. But the stuff that I do know, I do recommend to her. And then I go, how do you want to move forward?
Okay, just really quickly, Kendra. Yeah.
How do we work as women?
Yeah, how do you work as women? Because we got 19, 18. Counting down.
I try to uphold a sense of collaboration, and so I think
she's a very good collaborator.
Yeah, I think collaboration is much easier with women, in my experience, because...
And I'm going to cut you off right there. I am so sorry.
No, it's okay.
Thank you so much, dear listeners, for listening to Badass Lady Folk on Radio Free Brooklyn, watching on Manhattan Neighborhood Network. You've been listening to STooPS, watching, wherever you're doing this. I'm your host, Christine Stoddard. Tune in next time.
Bye.